Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where professionals in the field educate, inform and inspire the community to live a more balanced and healthier lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julie Rudakova, and she will be talking with us about children's respiratory health. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today.
So what are some of the common children's respiratory health issues?
Well, I see a lot of children in my practice, and most often parents bring their kids with tonsillitis, recurrent coughs, and of course asthma. Asthma is one of the top conditions that I see children for. And what is asthma? Asthma is constriction of airways, really. And the body, when it does that in response to a trigger, it can be an emotional trigger, it can be a chemical trigger, can be viral. There is a physical activity-induced asthma. And when that happens, body starts producing mucus as well to safeguard itself, to expel the trigger and to moisten the airways. So it's a very, very natural response of the body. There is no pathology is that. When that happens, it's the body doing its work, protecting itself, although it seems and sounds and looks terrible to observe your child struggling to breathe. Another common respiratory condition that I see in kids is anything to do with tonsils, adenoids. So they are lymphatic tissues that are located at the back of the throat in the nasal passage, and they are immune tissues. They're lymphatic immune tissues, and it's not uncommon for young children to go through that because their immune system is maturing, and that's quite normal if it becomes a pattern. And if they get recurrent tonsillitis and enlarged adenoid to the point of not being able to breathe for months on end, then we have an issue and we need to address that. But from my perspective, the thing is that even when all the tissues are cut out, all adenoids gone, tonsils are out, what happens, what I observe is that they still breathe through the mouth. They can still snore. They may have initial adjustment and parents are happy and there is an improvement, but then they go back to the pattern, to the original pattern of mouth breathing, and that's not helping their dental health, their emotional health. Children wake up tired, and that's the worst thing, because children by their nature are very energetic. They have so much energy. They need energy to grow, to develop, to grow bones, to multiply cells, and for the brain to develop. And when they lose that, it sets them back. So it comes down to retraining the receptors in the brain, and that's where we use the Buteyko technique.
So can you explain to us what is the Buteyko technique? How does it work?
So it was developed by the late Dr. Buteyko many decades ago, and originally it was used for cardiovascular disease, but then it was trialed for asthma and respiratory disease because it is to do with your lungs and bronchi. And what it does, it teaches the body, again, reteaches, the body has to relearn how to breathe in a more functional way. What does that mean, to breathe in a more functional way? So there is a certain breathing rate that we aim at, and it's about 6 to 8 breaths per minute. So 6 to 10 maximum breaths per minute is our optimal range, right? So it's a slow breathing. It's gentle, so when you sit next to someone, you ideally shouldn't be able to hear them breathe, right? Sometimes it's very audible, our breath. Yeah, you sit to a person at the table in a cafe or at a function and you can hear them breathe. So that's not something that we call functional. The next one is how we breathe. Do we use the nose or the mouth? Right. So with the mouth, if you look at the hole here and here, mouth is much bigger. So we lose more important gases such as carbon dioxide, which is the driver to breathing, not oxygen. So Buteyko technique, what it does, it teaches us to go back to the original blueprint of the healthy breathing. The rate, what organs we use, what muscles we use to breathe, so the diaphragm instead of the chest, nose instead of the mouth, and proper breathing rate, and how we breathe, gentle or forceful. So that's in a nutshell what we do with the functional breathing retraining.
So what would be your advice to parents with kids who have respiratory health issues?
My advice would be to go back to the fundamentals and address their breathing patterns. It's super important, as I said before, to optimize the results of their treatment. And they can start with observing their child's breathing. And when they notice that the lips are slightly open, even if there is no audible breathing through the mouth, but the lips are slightly open, it means that the child is losing certain chemistry. And what they can do, I always say, they can say, close your mouth, but it becomes repetitive and annoying. So what I always say, just find a word like a giraffe and have this game with a child. When you say the word giraffe, it means that they need to close the lips and close the mouth, and that pushes the body to breathe through the nose. So reestablish nasal breathing at all costs is my tip. And of course, we need to go and seek help of a professional naturopathic practitioner or any medical practitioner and get a proper assessment and a proper plan.
Thank you so much for your time, Julia. If you'd like to know more about children's respiratory health issues and Julia, you can visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. Stick around, because after the break, we'll be back with another guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, psychotherapist specialising in hypnotherapy Julie Makin will be talking about find freedom from a habit or an addiction. Welcome back. Our second guest is Julie Makin, a psychotherapist specialising in hypnotherapy, and we will be discussing how to find freedom from an addiction or a habit. So good to see you again, Julie.
Thank you.
So can you define for us what is an addiction and what is a habit?
Yes. So how I would say about a definition, and this is Gabor Mate's, for an addiction, it's anything that provides you with relief, that gives you pleasure, something that you crave, and it may have negative consequences. And even if it has negative consequences, you still continue to do it. So I feel that that is a great definition for what an addiction actually is. What I would say about a habit, so let's just say that somebody might have a habit about getting ready in the morning, and just perhaps they, leave something out, or they don't do something, and then maybe they might start to get a little bit agitated or worried, or, they start going into that fight-flight state. So that's the way I would go about saying a habit. Now, as far as addictions are concerned, it can really be anything. So it could be, the good old chocolate addiction, or maybe there's, the more the hardened ones like the drugs or the alcohol. People who go to gym and they get addicted to the pain in their body from doing their workout. That is an addiction. So it can be anything that is a substance or a behaviour.
Why do people have addictions and habits?
Let's just say we have an uncomfortable emotion that comes up. For this purpose, let's just call it anxiety. Okay? We all know that anxiety is really uncomfortable to sit in, really uncomfortable. And I can actually remember one particular moment for myself when I'm, at a party, and I've got my glass sitting on the wooden table in front of me, and it's full of water. And, my friends are around and they're having a great time. They're singing, the music is blaring, and I'm reaching over to get my glass, and my hand is shaking. I grab the glass and I can see the glass, the water starting to shake in there. I have to use my second hand in order to stabilize it because the anxiety is so bad, just to get the glass to my mouth. So anxiety can come up in different ways for you. It can be so powerful. Now, when we've got our anxiety that's coming up, a lot of people, because we're sitting in that discomfort, we need to soothe that pain. And we might do that with smoking or gambling or a drug, whether it be prescription or perhaps, more recreational drug. There's so many different things that this can help, but this helps to soothe that pain and just puts it back down. And we get to a point where, we might feel uncomfortable in our environment. This might start coming up, but you don't feel it, you don't recognize it because this is already on it, helping us. So the first thought that you might get is, oh, I really need that cigarette or whatever. And it's already there helping soothe it. Now this might be, so whatever the addiction or behavior, whether it be substance, that could actually be soothing the pain. It could be your time out. It could be your escape. Whatever it is, I invite whoever feels that they might have an addiction or a habit, I invite them to get really compassionate for themselves, okay?
So you've mentioned self-compassion. Is there other tools that people can use to help with their addiction or their habit?
Absolutely. I think that the first thing to notice is if you start having this anxiety come up and perhaps you have your first thought of wanting that cigarette or, that first drink of alcohol or whatever it is for you, whatever your coping mechanism is, I invite you to hold off from having it and just begin to notice and have an awareness of what it is that's coming up for you. So it might be agitation in the body. Your hands might start to shake, you might feel your heart start to race. But then what I'd really invite your guests to notice is if they can go inside their body, really focus on that part of the body and really thank it, because an emotion is made up of all physical sensations. Just imagine if you've got an emotion, if you were to think of it like an opera. Okay, now an opera can be so extremely powerful. It has the power to make you laugh, make you cry, make you happy, or make you sad. But if you can imagine the power that opera would have if there was just the one instrument playing, just like if there was just the one physical sensation that you were focused on, what would the power then be?
What practical advice do you have for our viewers?
Okay, so the practical advice that I would provide viewers is that if they, after completing that little exercise that I just provided, so just holding off and just noticing what is coming up in the body, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, please seek a professional therapist. Once again, we're looking at all different types of modalities. So whatever is right for you, my suggestion would be for somebody to seek somebody that works with the body, because it's the body that's where it's at. I know that there has previously been people who have worked with particular therapists for maybe three years, and they may have had an emotional eating issue, but then when they've gone and sought help with working with the body, it really didn't take long for them to just drop that emotional eating issue, and they were able to feel safer in the world. They were approaching things differently. So it really depends on the person, what is right and safe for them as to what action of therapy it is that they take. But I strongly suggest people have a look at different associations, because you want to know that those people are qualified. You don't want to just, go off and choose anybody. But you want to go to associations, have a look at what practitioners it is that they suggest on their web pages.
Thank you, Julie.
No worries.
If you would like to know more about Julie Makin and addictions and habits, please visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll be back with another interesting guest and another interesting topic. Stay tuned. After the break, men's coach and registered nurse, Kosta Michalopoulos, will be talking about how men manage relationships. Welcome back. Our last guest today is men's coach and registered nurse, Kosta Michalopoulos, and he's here to talk to us about how men manage relationships. Welcome to the program, Kosta.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
How do men manage relationships?
Relationships is not our forte traditionally for us men, and that comes, I think, looking back at the narrative that we have been passed on from our society, from our parents, from our families, not to express our emotions. And I think that's the fundamental point here. We don't tend to speak. We don't tend to say what we want and what we need. And if we do and we don't get the right answer, we tend to sort of withdraw. But in saying that, there is the other approach as well, where we provide, we become the providers, where we focus on that, and that becomes our main, almost our sole purpose. And that can have a significant impact on the relationship as well, because that will create resentment for our partners, resentment for our family. So how do we actually manage this? Awareness. Awareness is the first step. Awareness of our needs, our beliefs, our values, our emotions, and then how do we actually communicate? And one of the most important tools is emotional intelligence. And someone will say, what is emotional intelligence? I think the word says it. It's not the intellect, it's how we manage this. How do we process our emotions and maybe expand our vocabulary as men, besides saying I'm good or I'm bad, like have a few different emotions in there, whether it's anger, being scared, being vulnerable. And by doing this, we invite our partners, we invite our loved ones into our inner world. And that is the first step.
With communication, how do men fare?
If it's not silence, it's silence. It's us men, unfortunately, we tend to suppress our emotions, and that will show through the communication by not engaging. Yes, in the relationship, how does that look? It can create a lot of conflict. It can create resentment, and it has an immediate impact within the family, because things are not being discussed, things are not being resolved, and creates layers of complexity, layers of the resentment, layers of issues, unresolved issues. And eventually, unfortunately, we see in Australia these days, 1 in 2 marriages almost leads to a divorce. And that's the direct impact of the lack of communication. So communication is probably the most important thing in a healthy relationship. And what does it mean for us men? How do we actually communicate? And that's a hard thing. Again, awareness of our emotions, of our needs. How do we bring this into? By being vulnerable. And this is a new word that we hear in these days all the time. What does it mean for a man to be vulnerable? To be in touch with her emotions. That's where the emotional intelligence comes in. Understanding what is happening here and being able to verbalize that. And with our partners, with our family, be able to say what's happening. And by not shutting down is not helping anyone. And a lot of men will use the excuse, almost the excuse of being the provider. I'm busy, I'm working, I'm providing for you, which is absolutely beautiful and fair, and we need to celebrate. But if you use this as an excuse, Where is this leading? What's happening within the relationship? Because obviously we need the necessities, we need the house, we need the food, but after that, what happens? Where do we draw the line? And as men, we need to be able to communicate that clearly with our partners. And we need to be able to listen as well. What is happening? What do we need to do? And another little thing there I want to mention is the active listening. Not the listening where you're holding the phone, or not the listening where you're watching the footy on TV. That's not listening. Listen without interruptions. Listen without our minds traveling. Just be fully present. And that will have an immediate impact, because our partners will feel that they've been heard, they've been respected, and they will feel safe. And that will nurture the communication, the effective communication, which is based on love and kindness.
Do you have any tips for men in relationships?
Communication, obviously, it's not going to be the only solution. We need to do other things as well. And quality time is very, very important. What does that mean? How does that look? Even the 5 minutes before we leave to go to work, or the 5 minutes when we come back and we have a conversation where we ask, how actually was your day? That 5 minutes can actually make or break a relationship. And obviously, we need to expand this a bit more, whether it's going to be the romantic date, the occasional, or even the frequent romantic date, the weekend away, the holidays, the quality time where we need to prioritize our time and our relationship instead of all the external stuff that's happening. We all have busy lives, we all have responsibilities, but if we don't nurture our relationship, we know that sooner or later it's going to break down. The other thing that is very important is, how do we manage conflict? There is not a single relationship without conflict. And if there is such a relationship, that means that things are not being said. Conflict is part of a healthy relationship. But how do we manage that? Obviously, if conflict is not dealt with care and with kindness and with love, can create resentment, can create hate, can create isolation, loneliness, because things are not being resolved. So how do we actually communicate when we feel intrigued, when we feel challenged in a conversation? What I find that works perfect with me is just taking a breath. Just taking a simple breath, and just before I respond, before I react, I just think, what am I going to say? That split second or 3 seconds, when you take that little break, can actually have such a significant impact, because you take control of your emotions. And then by also thinking what the other person is experiencing, we can't fix things by ourselves. And that's when it's a good opportunity to ask for help, whether it's a relationships counselor, whether speaking with someone outside of the immediate environment, and get a different perspective, get the clarity. It is very, very important.
That was really informative. Thanks, Kosta.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you'd like to know more about how men manage relationships and Kosta, go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And that's all we have time for today. Goodbye.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.